Alrighty, Johnny. This is the blue-white breakdown. This is the first time since I have been at PennLive that we've gone live. Believe we should be on YouTube right now. Hopefully, some people join in with us here in a little bit. But Johnny, it's CFP selection day. We just traveled back from the Big Ten championship game. I'm sure we could get into some thoughts from that too. A lot of lingering thoughts from that game for me, for sure. Um, but long day of travel, some CFP selection stuff in between. And I think all in all, what our takeaways are that Penn State did pretty well.
They did, Max. They did. Off the top, I want to give a shout out to my two old roommates in Pittsburgh for letting me crash for the weekend to break this drive up from Philly to Indy, and they drove me back as well, which allowed me to be doing nothing but CFP monitoring and writing, throughout that car ride from Indy to Pittsburgh. Shout out John and Brett. Man, shout them out. They're PennLive subscribers. They follow our stuff. And we love that.
There we go.
They're not subtext subscribers. We got to get them on board with that because we love all the responses and all the interaction that we've received on the subtext. And I know that we got a lot of opinions and a lot of thoughts that we'll be mentioning throughout the podcast. But look, Max, Penn State, number 6 seed in the college football playoff, playing SMU in the first round at Beaver Stadium, noon kick. Not surprised. Ultimately, not surprised. We can dive in. No, I figured Notre Dame home game was going to get the ESPN billing, because ESPN doesn't get to broadcast many Notre Dame games, home Notre Dame games as well with the NBC contract.
Right.
And then Ohio State, Tennessee, that just seems something that would be primed for ESPN. That the other 2 games would go to TNT during the day on Saturday, and Penn State gets the noon treatment yet again. But there will be no big noon kickoff associated with that. That's on TNT.
For whatever that's worth. But
for whatever that's worth. Traffic will still be an absolute nightmare. But Penn State gets SMU in the first round. If they were to beat the Mustangs, who on Saturday night lost a thriller, a heartbreaker to Clemson in the ACC championship game. If Penn State were to beat SMU, they will play Boise State, Ashton Genty and the Broncos, who won the Mountain West Conference championship on Friday night, and really ever since that 3-point loss to Oregon in September have looked very good, winning every game since. And but I do think Penn State's draw was super favorable, arguably the best draw of any team that has to play in the first round of the college football playoff in this new 12-team format. But my initial impressions were, Penn State after the Big Ten title loss on Saturday night, a little difficult to deal with, right? Those players were emotional after the game. Some obviously fans being whether annoyed, frustrated, disappointed. But man, there was some good news for Penn State and Penn State's fans on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, there definitely was. Just to kind of react to the rankings themselves, I did not expect it to be this good. Let me just start out with the fact that I totally agree with what the committee did. I think they handled the rankings really well all year since they started in November. And I think that the 12 teams that we ended up with were the correct 12 teams for the setup this year. I mean, are there going to be complaints and maybe worthy ones about the automatic bids from conferences? Yeah, probably. And that's going to be a discourse until the end of time, because as James Franklin always likes to say, the 13th guy is always going to complain. It doesn't matter how many teams there are, doesn't matter how you do it. It's causing some problems no matter what. But I think for the parameters for the season, I think the committee handled it well. I appreciate that they stuck to their guns, and after saying teams that play in their conference championship won't be punished heavily, did that. I think it's good that Penn State, despite losing to Oregon and not playing their cleanest game at times, stayed ahead of Notre Dame. It is very good to see. It sets a good precedent. I think it's great that SMU got in over Alabama. Now, don't get me wrong, anybody who's listening, I'm not necessarily saying SMU is a better team than Alabama. But based on the resume, based on the things that the committee has said, based on everything that got us here, I think it's correct that SMU got in. Johnny, I know you feel the same way. You left that sly little note at the end of your reaction video Saturday night, but I think the committee handled it well, and I think that Penn State has got to be like singing praises right now for getting this draw. Like obviously all 12 teams are very good, capable of beating anybody else here, but you get the Mountain West team in the second round, and you get you get an SMU team that was probably the last team to make it in, who just lost to the lowest ranked team in the playoffs. So it doesn't get much better for Penn State. I could go on a soapbox about reseeding. I know I mentioned it maybe the last time we talked about the playoff, Johnny, but number one Oregon is going to have to play either Tennessee or Ohio State in the second round after beating Penn State, whereas Penn State is going to go on, if they win, to play Boise State. I think we should reseed, but it's an interesting thought experiment, and I think that all in all, this was a really, really good day for college football.
Max, either reseed or just have the conference championship games be automatic bids, but not necessarily first round buys. Yeah. But again, conversation for a different day. Commenting on what the committee did, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I said, I believe on our last podcast, we were talking about the CFP, like upcoming, looking ahead to the conference championship weekend. I said that, if Notre Dame ended up passing Penn State, ended up being ranked ahead of Penn State, my mind would have exploded, and it would have, and it didn't. My brain, my head is still fully intact after Selection Sunday. Despite it being on very minimal sleep after a late night working in Indianapolis. But yeah, Penn State being still ahead of Notre Dame is massive. Notre Dame, just look at the paths, right? So we talked about it. Penn State has to beat SMU at home as a 7.5 point favorite. That's where it opened the line. And then they have to go beat Boise State on a neutral field at the Fiesta Bowl out in Phoenix. And then they get, a team in the semifinal, whether that's Georgia, Notre Dame. But the fact that Notre Dame being the 7 seed, if they get past Indiana in the first round at home, they got to play Georgia in the second round. I think the only team looking at it, like in terms of the teams that have to play in the first round, the only team that might have a better path to the semifinal. And then once you get to the semifinal, man, you win one game, you're in the national championship. Yeah. I think the only team that you could argue might have a better path to the semifinal among those teams that play in the first round would be Texas. Texas welcoming, Clemson, the only 3-loss team in the field, to Austin for a first round game. And then the winner of that, if Texas beats them, Texas goes and plays Arizona State. It's old big, it's, I wouldn't call them regional rivals, but they're close enough. Yeah. They're relatively in that same area of the country. The team with Cam Scatterbo, who they're just rolling right now, but still, awesome. It's so much they're so much fun. The run that they're on, Sam Levitt's a baller. Watching that that beat down in the Big 12 championship against Iowa State, I was really, really impressed. Ultimately, glad Alabama's not in the field. I know that if SMU got blown out by Clemson, they probably would have been. But the fact that came down to a field goal, if Penn State had gotten blown out by Oregon, they probably would have dropped behind Notre Dame, I think. But they didn't, right? Like we talked about it after the game. We wrote a lot about it, the Big 12 or the Big 10 championship game. Penn State overcame an early deficit, went toe-to-toe with the number one team in the country, and lost by 1 score. Like in a game that they really weren't expecting to be in up until a week prior. So, I think it's a good situation for Penn State. I think good on the committee for how they handled it, for how everything worked out. The format itself, they are not controlling that. Like I've seen Joel Klatt and a bunch of people on Twitter on Sunday afternoon, complaining a lot about, the way these teams are seated and, the buys and all that. And it's like the committee doesn't control that. Like that's the conference commissioners that agree to the setup of this whole thing. So barking up the wrong tree there, bud. I don't understand that whatsoever. Yep. I think this is pretty good for Penn State. This whole setup and everything else that could be ahead for them.
Yeah, I think it's generally as good as it could be. I do have unfortunate news, Johnny. I have been informed that we are not live on YouTube.
No.
I clicked the right buttons. At least
it says live recording.
I know, and it doesn't usually say that. Usually, it just says recording. So
It's devastating.
if you guys are watching, hopefully, like always, and you're like, why the hell is there no live link? Well, I don't know. Hopefully, we figure it out sometime. But no,
Know that
I
we
think
tried. Know that we tried. We tried to get this to be a little bit more interactive.
we
We tried
did.
to get some comments flowing. We tried to get people involved. What are you going to do?
Yeah. It is what it is. But no, I think the takeaway is that Penn State really lucked out. There are some interesting like subplots to this where you say that this is as good a path as Penn State could get, and in the wake of Penn State losing another top 5 game under James Franklin that it had a chance to win, you say, well, if they don't make the second round or maybe even the semifinal, you really start to raise some eyebrows at what's going on in Happy Valley. But, all things considered, from where we are right now, this is a good situation for Penn State. I know that both of us left Lucas Oil Stadium last night really impressed with Penn State, and like they played like crap at a lot of moments of that game. Like 4 15-yard personal fouls before like 2 minutes ran off in the second quarter. Drew Allar had 2 terrible interceptions, but like with all of those moments, Penn State just kept clawing back into it against an Oregon offense that was just completely unstoppable. I think we both came away really impressed, and I have like if I had to predict it today, like I'm taking Penn State to get to the semifinal against Georgia, or against Georgia or whoever wins, that quarterfinal. But like they play the games for a reason. But I think that there's going to be some interesting stuff. It is a whiteout this weekend in Beaver Stadium. We talked to James Franklin today. We didn't get much on SMU, of course, but because he just hasn't watched the film. But we did. We know it's going to be a whiteout, so that'll be cool. But it is at noon, so it's the first noon whiteout since 2015. I think it's a little hilarious that Penn State made the playoff and still ended up with a noon game. I know you. I agree with you. I think it makes sense. I understand why, but it's still hilarious for all the things that have happened. But I don't know. I just like if I had to predict it today, I think I like Penn State going to the semifinal. But I do think, like I said to start this thought, like you might consider there's some pressure on Penn State now with this draw.
I was going to say, Max, because I'm the same way. Like at this point, with this draw, with what they have, and again, this is like what we've talked about already, with it being, a manageable draw, a good draw, a favorable draw. Like, it's not easy, right? It's not going to be easy to beat SMU that has an incredibly explosive offense. Like Rhett Lashley, their head coach, is an offensive mastermind. Their quarterback, Kevin Jennings, I've watched a lot of him this year, and he makes plays out of absolutely nothing. And it's just, he is dynamic as quarterbacks come in college football, and they've got a really good pass rush as well. Some talented guys on the defensive front. Like, that's not going to be easy. If they make it past them, stopping Ashton Genty is not going to be easy. Like, no one has really done that this year. The guy put up 197 yards and 3 tutties against Oregon. That guy is pretty much good for 200 rushing yards a game.
Yeah. I'm selfishly really hoping that Penn State wins this weekend so that I can see Ashton Genty.
You keep saying this weekend. It's in like 3. No, it's like 2 weekends from now.
Oh, dude, I'm on like less than 4 hours of sleep right now. Like, let's make that clear.
No, you're just excited. It's fine. You're overeager. That's fine. That's all good, man.
Anyway, point stands. I'm selfishly hoping Penn State beats SMU in order to see Ashton Genty in person. So, because that would be freaking sweet.
It would. No, he's incredible. So, and that's the thing. Like that's my point, is that none of these draws are easy.
Right.
They are more manageable, and they are more favorable. And I think given that Penn State is already favored against SMU, that's not going to change. And I think they would be favored against Boise State as well in a quarterfinal.
Yes.
I guess if Texas Texas is favored against Clemson, and then they would they would probably be favored against Arizona State. You can't say that about the other two first round to quarterfinal matchups that a first round team would be favored in both games. So I think my point is, what I'm getting at is, I agree with you that this team really should make the semifinal with this draw. Do you think it would be, missing expectations or not hitting expectations if they don't get to the semifinal? Because I know what you might say is that, before the season, we talked about it, before the season, the expectation was to get to the college football playoff. So some would say that's moving the goalposts. For me, that's just adjusting expectations.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you think about it.
No, I don't think it's moving the goalpost, because you got, I mean, in some ways, like, you have to move the goalpost when you get to the end of the season and you play potentially, like, if you get past, I think SMU on paper is a tougher game than Boise State would be.
I agree.
I mean, it's a power conference team versus a Mountain West team. I think that the line would be bigger if they won and played against Boise State. But, like, if you make the semifinals and you're playing a Mountain West team, or if you're looking at the first round where you're playing an ACC team that lost to the lowest ranked team in the playoffs, that doesn't have like a ton of huge wins, but like has like I don't know, like, the bottom line is you're going to be favored, and if you're in this situation again, like, fans can only take James Franklin losing with expectations so many times. Like, I do think that right now you call this season an overwhelming success. Like, obviously you would have wanted to see Ohio State. You would have wanted to see Penn State beat Ohio State, but they were within a score, and really just did not play their best on the offensive side of the ball. They took care of business in every other game. They made a trip to the Big Ten championship that nobody was ready for, and made it a one-score game with a chance to win right at the end. Like, I think on paper right now, before the playoff is played, I think that this season is considered a success, because we wanted to see Penn State make the playoff to prove that James Franklin was still on track, and he did. But I do think it's fair to say that expectations change because of the circumstance that they've been put in. I mean, I don't know, like, I don't think you go crazy if they lose either in the first or second round. Like, and I'm not going to say what I'm thinking, but like, I don't think you go crazy, but I do think it would be considered a pretty significant disappointment if you don't win at least one game in this playoff. And I think that there would be maybe a little more pressure heading into the 2025 season.
Max, if they don't beat SMU, like, that's a failure.
Yeah.
It's a successful regular season, to get to this point. But if that's the final taste you have in your mouth, if they were to lose to SMU, and again, this is not me denigrating or throwing SMU to the side, because I've watched that team a lot this year, and I've had them ranked higher than most AP voters have had them ranked all throughout the year. Like, I respect that team a lot. But if you lose to SMU at home in the first round of the playoffs, man, like, opportunities don't, like, this is the first year of the 12-team playoff, right?
Yeah.
Penn State gets the Big 12 title game, or Big 10 title game. I keep saying Big 12. ASU is on my mind. Camp Scatterby is on my mind. I'm sorry.
You've been bitten by the Sun Devils.
They're great. They're so much fun. What I'm getting at is, opportunities like this don't come around every year. No. I mean, this is quite literally the first year of the 12-team playoff.
Yes.
But I'm looking ahead. I'm looking ahead to the Big Ten, when Michigan is better than what it was this year. Yeah. When USC is better than what is this year. I'm not expecting Indiana to go 11-1 every year, but what I'm getting at is, the Big Ten is going to be tougher in terms of the top to bottomness, and not so much top heavy. Mm-hmm. And so when you're in this position, when you're able to navigate your regular season at 11-1, which should not be taken for granted, and we've talked about that a lot, but you find yourself as the 6th seed. I don't know how many years in the next 5, if this remains a system, which I doubt, because they're going to change it and add more teams or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, this is a massive opportunity to not only be here, but to
Mm-hmm.
be in this spot, to
Yeah.
be in the 6 seed, to be considered that high and get this kind of path. And so they can't waste it. If they lose to SMU, they're wasting it.
Yeah.
Uh, I would argue I think if they lost to Boise, I think it'd be a little bit of a waste. I mean, I get it. Like, you'd have that home win and it would be good vibes and all that kind of stuff. But man, if they don't make the semifinal with this draw, like, I don't want to be like too, crazy with this, but like, I feel like it would be a failure of the playoff, of their playoff opportunity, if they don't get to the semifinal and give themselves a crack against Georgia or Notre Dame or maybe Indiana, but probably Georgia or Notre Dame.
I'm not in disagreement by any way, shape, or form. What I was getting at by saying like you don't want to go crazy is like I think there's potential for if they lose either game that people are going to call for James Franklin's head,
Yeah.
and
No.
this
is what James Franklin got his contract for, by the way.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that, and like, I get it. Like, obviously you want to beat Ohio State. This is a column that's been formulating in my head. I haven't put pen to paper on it, but it's coming at some point. This is what you gave James Franklin his 10-year contract for in 2021. I'm sorry, Correct. It was not. It was with the hope that they would catch Ohio State and beat Ohio State, and now it's like catch Oregon and beat Oregon. But really, with the onset of the 12-team playoff, when they gave it to him back in November of 2021, it was keeping this team a 10-win, possibly an 11-win team in the regular season, and giving yourself an opportunity to make a run and beat some of those teams in the college football playoff. That is what he got his contract for.
It's absolutely true.
So like, if they lost in the first round or the second round, like, I'm not going to be calling, like, I'm not going to be writing the column saying he should be canned. Like, I know he won't be either, but yeah, there will be some of that, of course, from the fan base.
Yeah, and I think like I don't think that it's fair to like say can him, but it's fair to be like this has to change by like maybe next year in order to still feel confident. But I think we're in agreement. Like, this is an opportunity. You need to capitalize on it. I personally, like, I think Penn State will. Like, I've seen like literally coming off of the game last night in Indianapolis, like, I feel really good about Penn State's chances to handle business. Number one, like, yes, SMU is a good team. We keep saying it. We're going to talk a lot more about the Mustangs, but like, they're playing at home in the middle of December. SMU is coming up from Dallas. Like, there are factors at play here that make Penn State even more in a better situation than like just saying they're playing SMU. Like, even if it's at a neutral field, like, they're playing at Beaver Stadium. Like, that is such a huge part of this that even I've overlooked until a couple minutes ago when I was trying to put together my thoughts. But like, there is an opportunity. You got to capitalize on it. And the last part of why I feel like it would be such a disappointment and a failure is because, and this is going to turn into a podcast, a articles chain of conversation that we're going to talk about for a long time. But I've been thinking about it. I'm a little worried about what is going to be on that roster next year. Mm-hmm. We have, like, for years, we've pegged this season with the 2022 class as juniors as like the year. You're going to lose some of those guys to the draft this year. Like, without going too in depth on, guys who are maybes, like Abdul Carter is like, there's no reason for that guy to come back. Like, he's going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. And that alone is huge for your defense. And like, look at the group of seniors that are leaving. Even on the defensive line, Devontae Thomas is gone. Jalen Reed in the back end is gone. Like, guys who are just out of eligibility. Jalen Kimber's gone. And that's only on the defense right now. So I think that is, like I said, that's a whole nother layer to this that is going to be a lot more focused in the offseason once we get there. But like, this is the prime time, and this is the prime situation for Penn State to make some noise on a national scene in a way that it really hasn't since 2016.
Big time. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it is a massive opportunity, Max. And I don't know. I don't want this podcast to sound like almost preemptively negative.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if they don't do this, like, also, like, hats off to, like, my hair looks terrible right now, so I'm not actually going to take my hat off. But being in the car for 6 hours, like, no.
Hey, I at least got a shower in this morning, so it was yeah.
Look, but hats off to the season that they have had so far.
Yeah.
We talked about that, right? We've broken that down in detail, week by week, game by game, what they've been able to do so far. And I came away really impressed with what they did in Indianapolis against Oregon. Yeah, the mistakes were obvious. The penalties, the 2 turnovers by Drew, especially the first one was really just a bad throw, bad decision, right? But he made some serious big time throws in that game. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen ran for over 2 bills. Tyler Warren was for the most part still Tyler Warren. The pass rush didn't get Gabriel on the ground, but obviously you still trust that talent. You trust an Abdul Carter, Dennis Sutton, Zane Duran, et cetera, to do a job and get Kevin Jennings on the ground and get Madsen or Maddox, Boise's quarterback, on the ground if they get there. So, yeah, look, there's a lot to like about this team right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot to like. And consider, too, not only did Penn State play well against Oregon, but Oregon had to play really well against Penn State.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Consider that, too. Consider the flip side if you're a Penn State fan. Like, Oregon had to be clicking and hitting on all cylinders on offense to keep up with what Penn State ultimately did as well. So, they got Oregon's best shot. They got Ohio State's best shot earlier in the season. And I know they came up empty. They come up short in both of those opportunities, both of those chances. But man, this team, Penn State is one of the best teams in the country. And we talked about the draw. Like they have a real opportunity to not just make the semifinal, but truly to make a run at the national title. So yeah, enjoy these next couple of weeks while we get to talk about the possibilities and we get to talk about what this team can do. And ultimately, I think we're all going to enjoy a playoff game at Beaver Stadium. That's going to be sick.
It's going to be really cool.
That's going to be really freaking cool.
Yeah.
And I know we eulogized the Beaver Stadium press box.
Coming back, baby.
In the Maryland game, we're all going to be back. So one more time, one last ride.
Yeah. I just have one more thing to add, or maybe two things. One really quick thing. I had my own thoughts about Drew Allar's performance last night. Obviously the 2 picks were both pretty bad, one worse than the other. But the dude showed up, and I wrote it. If you guys missed any of our coverage, I wrote about Drew's night a little bit, and it's over on PennLive. But I had a paragraph in there toward the end where I was just trying to wrap my mind around what happened, and I basically said listen, he was imperfect in a lot of ways. But he also, last night's version of Drew Allar is so much closer to the guy that can get Penn State to a national semifinal, a national championship, a Big Ten championship. He's not afraid to throw in tight windows anymore like he was last year. He's not afraid of interceptions. Mistakes are going to come, but he's in control of the offense right now, and he looks so much more confident. And I asked James Franklin about it because that's kind of how I felt. Yeah, there was bad, but there was a lot more good than bad, and it was very encouraging. And James Franklin basically said the same thing. He was like, yeah, there's probably 4 or 5 throws he really wants back, but he also made 5 or 6, 7 plays that literally were some of the best quarterbacking I've ever seen. That's what James Franklin said today. And I'm with him. So I think that's a point of encouragement. But then the last thing I really do want to send it out on, before your final thoughts, Johnny, if you have any, is we got a comment after our pregame video at Oregon that's have some respect, don't be homers, but have some respect. I'm not calling this guy out because I get where you're coming from. We were both down on Penn State's chances, but we said good things about Penn State in that video. I said Nolan Rucci was one of the most improved players on the team. We said good things, and I think that this entire podcast where we're setting up the fact that Penn State needs to perform well in the playoff, I think that comes from a place of positivity. It sounds negative, but it comes from the idea that Penn State has done its job really well this year and has proven to us that we can trust them on a bigger stage, and we think that they're capable of this. So this idea of negativity that if they lose it's a problem and James Franklin has a lot more pressure on him going into next year. Like, that comes from the fact that they've played really well this year and they have a damn good team.
That they've played really well, that they have a damn good team, and that we both believe that they can make a run. Like that they can make, and again, not just like a run to like, oh yeah, participation trophy, in the national semifinal. Like they have a team good enough to make a run. And so if they were to fall short of that in the first round or in the quarterfinal, like that comes from a place of what we expect or what we think this team is capable of, which is a hell of a lot. And us picking Oregon in the Big Ten title game, doesn't diminish that. I mean, shoot, I had Oregon winning 31-27.
Yeah, I had a one-score game too.
Yeah, I don't think none of us from PennLive had like 38-10 or anything like that. And it did look like in the first half, it looked like at one point it might get there. When it was 28-10, I think. It looked like it was like, oh shoot, like what are they getting themselves into right now? Like this is going to go sideways, and they didn't. It didn't. And again, credit to the Nittany Lions. Like credit to Drew Allar for bouncing back from that first interception. Credit to the defense for continually, like even when Oregon starts out with 3 consecutive touchdown drives, they get a stop. The Allar pick puts them at the 1, gets a stop on the following series. Like there's a lot of fight in this team, and there's a lot of talent on this team, and we both expect that to show, during the college football playoff when they play SMU on Saturday, December 21st in Happy Valley. Again,
not this weekend, by the way.
Not this weekend. Don't. If you're a fan and you have a ticket, do not go up to Beaver Stadium on Saturday, December. What would it be? 14th.
14th.
Yeah. Don't go up on the 14th. You're not going to be able to see anything there.
Yeah. No, I think you said it, Johnny. Like, and also like you mentioned, Oregon and Ohio State giving Penn State its best shot. Like Penn State gets the best shot from everybody in the Big Ten because like the lower level teams. I said this on a podcast with Bob. I think. Like the lower level teams like a Minnesota this year, like an Illinois, Penn State is the one that's gettable. That's a resume builder compared to like an Ohio State or an Oregon right now, at least from an exterior perspective. Like, Penn State is the one that's gettable. And really those ones against Penn State have not been gettable under James Franklin, and they weren't this year again. So a lot of positive thoughts for the Nittany Lions. The topic of next year's roster and the way that like this needs to be a good send out for the guys who might not be here has been weighing on my mind a lot for a while. So I'm excited to see to get into the offseason and be able to analyze it a little bit. But for now, there's a lot of football left. I expect good things from Penn State, and also don't forget transfer portal opens this week. So we're going to start talking about next year a lot sooner than some of us may want to. But Johnny, I think that's it for us. For Johnny, it's Max Ralph on the Blue White Breakdown. Sorry you didn't get to see us live. We were really hoping that would work out, but we're going to fix it. We're going to go get in the film room. We're going to correct the mistakes. We're going to flush it. We'll be back better next time.
We're not going to let one loss turn into 2, Max.
That's right. We're going to flush it, and we're going to move on. We're going to watch the tape. But hope you watch this tape, and that's going to do it for us from the Blue White Breakdown here on PennLive.